I wanted to talk to you about back to office mandates versus incentives. This has been a hot topic for quite a while now. And the reason is that, post-COVID in 21-22, what we saw was a lot of companies offering a huge amount of flexibility to employees in terms of being able to work remotely, in terms of being able to have the choice of when they come into the office, whether they come into an office. We saw a huge amount of flexible workspace policies being implemented all across the world, from really small businesses to some of the giants of the FTSE 250 and also the S&P 500 as well. Over the past 12 months or so, since the beginning of 2023, we've seen a big reversion of that trend, where 2023 was really about return to office mandates. That doesn't seem to be stopping. So, a couple of weeks ago, we heard Deutsche Bank create a return to office mandate for their employees, and there's also been a bit of a backlash there. If you look at a lot of the mandates that we're seeing from a lot of companies come through, we're seeing a stick and carrot approach. And so in terms of stick, we're seeing a lot of policies which effectively threaten employees in some sense, with pay cuts, with lack of promotion opportunities, technically putting jobs at risk, and also talking about how essentially their career development will be stalled if they don't come into the office. You're also seeing lots of carrot approaches where companies are trying to incentivize people to come in. And some of those incentives are, I think, well-intentioned, but probably don't quite hit the mark with respect to what employees really, really care about. And so a really good example is Salesforce implemented a policy where they would make charity donations on behalf of employees if they started to return to the office more. Whilst this was well-intentioned, I think what's worth looking at a little bit deeply is what is really at the heart of why employees don't want to come into the office, especially when the employer is creating more and more mandates, whether they're carrot approaches or stick approaches. Key reasons why employees are hesitant to come into the office, whether that's on a regular basis or an ad hoc basis, depending on what you do. Most of us who live in big cities, a commute either way is roughly 30 minutes to an hour and a half, with most commutes in a city like London being an hour. This certainly happened to me. I've commuted all the way into the office. I battled the elements, I battled TFL. I've got here and actually I end up spending the entire day sitting on Zoom calls with people who are working from home. This is a pretty bad experience for most employees. They feel like they've done the right thing, especially if the employer asks them to come in, and actually the net result and the outcome of that has been really negative for them, where it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money, it's a waste of effort. They could have done that from home. And the second reason really is ending up in an empty office when you do decide to come in. And that creates what we call this empty office syndrome, which leads to this sort of vicious cycle. What we're starting to see is that if this happens to you sort of more than 3 times, you're way less likely to come into the office again if you've experienced that empty office at least 3 times before. Because every time you're about to walk out the door, you think, what's going to happen today? Is anyone actually going to be in? The third type is really to do with the nature of work. When we are doing particular roles, when we're working in different industries, sometimes we get quite tunnel visioned and we sort of assume that other people's jobs work similarly to ours. But really, if you look at office-based jobs, there's a huge spectrum, all the way from data entry to all the way down the other end of the spectrum, where most of your job is doing meetings, communicating with people. There'll be other roles like software engineering, for example, where a lot of your time has to be spent in deep work and concentration. And so really, the nature of people's work will also determine their appetite. What we personally find is that people who work in customer-facing commercial or sales teams are more willing and wanting to come in because they really crave that social interaction. And also they view perhaps sales as a team sport. They really value the ability to chat to the person next to them in the office if they have an issue, if they have a problem. Whereas perhaps if you're doing something really complicated like software engineering, something really technical, then a huge part of your time will be spent trying to figure out problems and working on your own, in which case coming into an open plan office, which may be noisy and distracting, is not particularly useful for you. Related also to that nature of work, personality types. I think it's really important to recognize lots of people work in lots of different ways. Some people really thrive at an open plan office with lots of noise, lots of energy going on in the background. Other people really thrive in library-like environments. And for some people, me included, I kind of need a mix of both. When I'm doing something really difficult, really technical, I really need a library-like atmosphere. When I'm doing something which is less technical than that, or I want to sort of meet and interact with people, then I prefer being in an open plan office. And I think bearing those things in mind of why people don't like to be in the office, I think businesses could start being a bit more intentional with creating, if they do want people back in and they do believe that the benefits of it in person are really tangible to the outcome of their business, they should know that employees think that as well. I don't think that there is sort of this binary battle between employers and employees. There's probably 3 or 4 key things that employers could do to work with employees to create a much better way to start working in the office. The first one is moving towards a structured hybrid approach. So there's a professor called Nick Bloom at Stanford who's been running the longest possible study on the impacts of remote and hybrid working. You should definitely check out his stuff. Most recent report talked about structured hybrid being the most effective way to work with respect to the employer and the employees. And what structured hybrid really means is basically saying, look, we have an expectation that people come into the office on certain days of the week. Perhaps that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, perhaps that's something else. And what that does is that creates this alignment between employees and employees. The employees like it because they know that other people are going to be in. They're not going to spend the entire time on Zoom calls. Those are the only days they have to be in versus other days they can work from home. One of the real benefits of that is meeting stacking. You know, the days you're going to be in the office, you can make sure that the meetings that you're having in that week, which will benefit from other people being in the same room as you, can happen on those days. And on the other days that you're not in the office and other people aren't in the office, you can then do that solo work. So I think companies could start moving towards that structured hybrid model where specific days of the week are encouraged. And we're starting to see some businesses have some success with that. We do that. We don't have a full mandate. All we say is that our office is open Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've got a part-time office, so we only have an office Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's when people can come in. And we're starting to see that become really effective and a really great tool for encouraging people to come back in-person interactions to happen, and people being less frustrated by coming to the office. The second aspect is really the quality of space. And so this is a really, really important one. What we're starting to see in the office market, especially in this post-COVID world, is a flight to quality. If you have a pretty crappy office atmosphere, if you have not much natural light, if the decor is bad, if there's very few amenities on site, if it's difficult to get to, then the likelihood that people will pay the cost of coming to the office, especially around the commute, and especially around meeting other people, the likelihood is low. But if you have an office which is a really appealing place for people to go to, they look forward to going there. Lots of natural light, the amenities are great, the Wi-Fi is great, you have coffee, you have food, you have stuff in the local area. That will mean that actually there's a real incentive for people to leave their homes, go in, and they're not just going in because it's a nicer place. They're going in because a nicer place is part of working in the team together. And actually good quality spaces typically mean that people do high quality work. And that's certainly what we're seeing in the office market, where there's a real bifurcation between low quality space, which has been sitting empty and vacant for many, many years, and high quality space, which is actually getting more and more expensive because that's the stuff that everyone wants. The third way to really do this is creating team rituals and making the office a destination. So again, quite a few companies are pretty good at this, which is around creating rituals on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a more ad hoc basis. At Hubble, we have something called Fika, which is the Swedish tradition of coffee and cake. Pre-COVID, we used to do that once a week. Over the course of COVID, we actually also stuck to once a week. And now we do it once a month, where it becomes a big occasion for everyone to come in. We also have another monthly ritual, which is our monthly drinks. And on top of that, we have people organizing various bits and pieces like poker nights and board game nights and whatever that is. So there's social occasions for people to come in. And really, if you think about it, if people are wanting to come in, you really want your employees to socialize with each other. You want their relationship at work to go deeper than just being colleagues and attending meetings together. You want people to really get to know each other, and actually creating social occasions and rituals is a really powerful way of doing that. The other rituals are really around letting the teams decide. So giving employees more and more autonomy and flexibility, and perhaps giving them some budget behind organizing stuff to do in person, whether that's at a team level, whether that's at a company level or an interest level. That again creates more and more incentive for people to come in. And I'm not saying here that there isn't a balance to be struck between employees and employees. The point I'm making here is that perhaps those carrot and stick mandates from employers are not as effective as they think it's going to be. You know, there's a saying by Charlie Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And really, I think employers should be thinking about that a lot, of how can we create really great incentives for people to get together, and how can we show them that actually, you know, within hybrid working, there's a really great path for employees to have a really good experience at work, where they're not just productive, but also happy as well. And that directly translates into great business outcomes for the company as well.